Hi guys, this is my first video blog. I'm a writer of words and music. Since I retired about 7 years ago, I've become more prolific than I ever was in my earlier life. I was always prolific at work, but 38 new symphonies, over 24 new books, cantatas, an opera, another opera, oratorio, requiem, chamber music, etc. I'm writing my first full-length novel now. It's a gift for my son's 31st birthday. I hope to have it finished by February. It's a retelling of the Hamlet story in the 21st century, although it incorporates lots of satire and science fiction as well. And as most of my works, is inspired by philosophies and religions and cultures from many different time periods and parts of the world. I'm having a great time writing it. Hopefully somebody will have a great time reading it. Recently, one of my neighbors said, "Oh, I see you've let your beard grow." Actually, what he was saying was, "I see that your beard is darker now than it used to be." So I told him that I've been working with a well-known geriatric specialist. And I said, "Perhaps you've heard of him. He's very famous." I told him his name, Dr. Justin Foreman. And my friend said, "No, I've never heard of Dr. Justin Foreman." I said, "Well, perhaps you know him by his trademark name, which he has shortened for his over-the-counter products. He has a full line of over-the-counter products for guys who want to look a little bit younger." And I said, he uses the name Just for Men. So my wife, who likes to be known as Bettina in my literary masterpieces, Bettina says, "I think that you are becoming a stand-up comic," I guess as opposed to a seated one. In any event, why humor, why words? Words have always been important to me ever since I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. I couldn't learn to read until much later. I was labeled slow. I think it was the second or third year of high school, or maybe it was at college or grad school, till I really caught up. And then it was, I guess, kind of fast, exponential, however you want to describe it. Unfortunately, back then, it wasn't recognized that many people have different learning styles. And both my son and myself, and a few other people I know, have to do things in their own time when they're ready. And I remember he was about 4 years old, and he was still drinking from the bottle. Maybe he was 3. And he said, he was very verbal also, from the age of 10 months or something. I remember his first sentence was, he looked out of the window and said, "Dog down." Very profound, but it was good. He climbed out of his crib about that time and ran across the living room. I don't remember him ever crawling. It just kind of went from sitting to running. That's kind of the way he is in his wonderful life. He's had his challenges, as all artists do, although he loves his IT job. In any event, he and I have to do things in our own time. And as I say, when he was about 3 or 4, whatever, he was still drinking from a bottle. And he said, "Mom, Dad, Daddy," whatever he called us back then, "when I'm 3 or 4, I'm going to stop with my bottle." And to the day, on his birthday, he handed us the bottle and said, "That's it," and never used it again. And interesting. It's kind of a model for me of how okay we can be with different learning styles. So anyway, back to my interest in words. And it is true that I was a slow learner. I really didn't catch up until about 5th grade. It was a little bit earlier than I joked before. But I had that idea of myself being slow, rattling around my brain along with other negative self-talk for about 50 years, 50, half a century. It wasn't all the time, but as most people do who have that kind of stuff in their head, I overcompensated. So I was valedictorian of middle school, valedictorian of high school, and of course it was hard if you couldn't read. Just kidding. Um, yeah, it really was valedictorian. I got a million awards. I was a very successful teenager as a musician, as an academic student, and then my life sort of slowed down to subnormal, barely normal pace. And then my neuroses and whatever culminated by the time I was age 60, which is, as of now, 7 years ago. And since then, as I've written extensively, I've had a lot of help from psychiatrists and therapists and medication, and group therapy of all sorts, mindfulness, anger management, men's groups, couples counseling, you name it, family counseling, etc. Oh, lots of journal writing over the last 30, 40 years. Meditation, yoga, yes, a lot of stuff. And it's helped pretty much. I still have my down moments. They're generally very fast, but usually less than a minute. It's kind of a V shape to, let me sit back down here. The downs are very, very sharp. They're really V shaped. And, but I have learned to make them very short with all the CBT and other techniques. So I'm grateful for that, and grateful for many things. I'm trying to find an angle here where the sun isn't totally screwing up my video. So when I was a kid, although I couldn't read when other kids were starting to read at 5, 6, 7 years old, 4, whatever, I had an adult-sized vocabulary, oddly enough. I guess it's because I hung around with so many adults, not intentionally, but my family was structured that way. And so I remember being about 4 or 5, coming out of the kitchen one day and saying, hey guys, I don't think I said that, but I said, here, look at my new concoction. I had made what I called liquid pizza. My dad wasn't too happy about a kid, boy, experimenting in the kitchen, so I kind of think that my cooking skills got shut down from an early age. I did try to cook later on in life, and I, for a while, made macrobiotic dishes. My wife, Bettina, in my literary masterpieces, as I say, said that everything I made was brown. And anyway, I stopped cooking for many years. I didn't stop eating, unfortunately, and put on some weight. But in any event, words were very important to me, and my dad was a professional humorist. I asked him once, am I your biggest joke? And he said, no, you're too short for that. I didn't listen. But he was a professional humorist. He wrote for the original Captain Marvel. He had radio programs for a couple of years with his brother, my uncle, and they had a play on Broadway which set the world's record, I think, for shortest run, one performance on Broadway. They had tours in all of the typical tours, New Haven, Philadelphia, wherever around the tri-state area. They'd raised much money to get to Broadway, and then, because I guess they ran out of money, they couldn't keep it open after the terrible first review. Mel Brooks, who was a friend of my uncle's, said that he immortalized my uncles and my father. And then a friend was working on it with them. I forget his name. Maybe some Schaffner or something. He immortalized my uncle, my father, and his friend in his Springtime for Hitler and the Producers, thinking it was the worst show that was ever on Broadway. In any event, my dad was a humorist, and he gave me one of my first jobs. I was a teaching fellow at Juilliard, making big $5 an hour, and I wanted to supplement my income, so by that time he had a small publishing company, and came up with a couple of titles that were interesting. He had gotten the original team from Captain Marvel, the writers and artists from the original comic book Captain Marvel, to work for him. And he thought that it was unfair in society that people had a stereotypical view of attractiveness. So he came up with an idea of Fat Man and the Flying Saucer. It was a great concept. The guy he was I guess a teenager or young 20s, and whenever there was a crime, he would eat a hamburger or some more food, maybe kind of like Popeye, pop a little spinach out, and he would turn into a flying saucer and do away with the bad guys. And it was also the time of the Vietnam fiasco. Um, Regardless of what you think about that war, and there are certainly a lot of intense things to say against it. He felt terrible for the returning vets because they weren't treated right, and so he came up with another comic called Super Green Beret. So anyway, he had some trade magazines, whatever, and I was working for him doing typing and filing. And one day he said, "Why don't you try your hand at humor?" And I was always a poor writing student, to say the best. And he had tried to help me with current events when I was a little kid, and because I was quote unquote slow, it didn't go so well. And I dreaded Sunday nights when he would try to quote unquote help me with my current events assignment. And so I hated the news, I hated newspapers, I hated writing. But anyway, I tried my hand at it, and he said, "Your job is to take a one-line joke and to turn it into a full-page feature." So after a number of drafts and his corrections and edits and suggestions, we came up with a publishable piece, which I then continued to write those one joke page, one extended joke, one a month or something like that for years. I liked writing, and it always was part of my professional toolkit after that. When I was getting my second graduate degree, an MBA from Stern at NYU, where I met Bettina, by the way. I was a consultant part-time for a consulting firm run by students. It was called the Urban Business Assistance Corporation. And I wrote a speech that I gave, and I had a great time with that. It was a marketing speech. And I remember one of my colleagues saying, "Gee, it was a pretty good marketing speech." I said, "Yeah, I haven't taken any marketing courses yet." And she said, "Yeah, but you've had a marketing life." And which was, in fact, true. I had started a marketing department at my dad's company and done some other marketing, and I kind of liked it. I'd read books on marketing, and I thought that was my calling at the time. Although I changed my major to information systems, which is a joke because I know so little about computers. Everyone was saying back then, "You should change information systems. That's where the future is." Well, maybe the future, but it wasn't my future. And as I said to some of my students over the years, just because something is good doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. School can be good, but not necessarily good for you. And same thing with everything in life. One man's treasure, one man's garbage is another man's treasure. A neighbor of mine was throwing out a painting the other day, and I liked it, so it's sitting in my bedroom right now. We're going to hang it up after we have our place repainted in a couple months. But anyway, words were very important to me, and so I got into marketing. I had my own little consulting firm for a while. Big money loser. Well, not a small money loser, but after a couple of years of losing money, when you're digging a hole, stop. So I stopped, and I went back to teaching music. And I remember at one point I was teaching at 5 schools at the same time, which is not uncommon for freelance musicians. And I was making something like $19,000. I had private students. I taught at 5 schools. I had a few commissions, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe I did a freelance job here and there. Never was successful as a freelance performer. I got a couple of commercial music jobs. It sounded very well paying, but that wasn't really my area. Maybe I should have stuck with it. But life takes its own courses. In any event, so I was making less than 20 grand. My wife, fortunately, had a decent job. And I kept going back and forth between business and music until I was about 40 when I got licensed to become a public school teacher, a music teacher. And I started working in a middle school in an urban neighborhood. And the school was built for about, 800, 900 kids. We had over 2,000. And although many of the kids were nice, most of them, maybe all of them were nice, but some of these nice kids would occasionally throw a stink bomb in your room if the door was left open, or urinate in the hallway, or shoot you in the face with a rubber band, or bring sharp objects to the class. Anyway, they had a game which was called, I don't know if they ever actually named it, but it was essentially, let's see how fast we can get rid of this one. In the 2 years before I had been there as their band director, they had 7 music teachers. And the first day I was there, one kid said to me, "So, mister, when are you going to retire?" I've never realized I had such a bad temper until I started working at that school. I used to yell every period of every day, but that was considered normal at that school. Not so at the elite high school where I taught for many years after that, and so I had to repress my anger, which I'm sure many people saw coming out of the steam coming out of my ears very frequently, because the frustrations there were much greater but much more subtle. In any event, as I say, since I retired, I've been writing every day, 7 days a week, 7 years, 7 days. I guess that's 49 somethings. I'm not a mathematician. But in any event, some days I write more than 7 hours. I say the average day for me is a lot more than 7 hours. Sometimes it's 14, and once it was even 19. And it took me 3 days to recover from that 19-hour writing binge. But I don't regret it. In fact, I don't regret anything. I have apologized to my son about the not-great stuff that I did to him when he was little. And he said, "Dad, don't worry about it, because I've forgiven you for most of those." But besides the fact, they all made me more resilient and self-reliant, which was about as good a gift as a parent can get. So anyway, thanks for listening to my first blog, and I guess I'll do another one soon. This was fun. Bye.